Hey folks, I didn't expect to be heading over to Scandinavia for this one, but while I was looking into some disappearances here in the UK, I came across this comment which led me to an unusual missing persons case that took place in Sweden. That being Mattias Borg, who disappeared in a place called Ljungby, which is a town in southern Sweden, back in the winter of 2020. It's a story that involves a sudden, unexplained missing persons case, a massive search effort that brought an entire community together, and a series of clues that caused people to disagree as to what happened. Mattias was a 17-year-old identical twin, described by everyone that knew him as a polite, well-behaved guy who was deeply integrated into his local community. He vanished into the night on the 5th of December 2020, leaving a party without any of his belongings, and despite the largest search operation to ever have occurred in that county, he has never been found. To appreciate why this case is so unusual, it's worth noting that the search involved hundreds of volunteers, the National Guard, and specialised dog teams. Yet the search was unable to provide any definitive answers and came up with almost nothing. Mattias was born on the 28th of February 2003, and he actually lived in the same small town that he would come to disappear in. He lived with his mother, Erratic, and his twin brother, Dennis. Based on my reading, and as far as I can tell, he didn't suffer from any known mental health issues, which is important to highlight as this is usually shared in the press, and often identified as something that might be a factor in a person purposefully going missing. Crucially, Mattias was actively engaged in local athletics, specifically participating in track and field with a regional sports team, which established him as a highly capable runner with a lot of endurance. This is a really important detail to keep in mind, because his physiological ability to run for long distances becomes a major factor when we look at the timeline of his disappearance and what exactly was going on. Academically and personally, Mattias demonstrated a strong forward-looking orientation. On the afternoon of Friday, the 4th of December, mere hours before he vanished, Mattias returned home from his daily activities and had an enthusiastic conversation with his mother. He expressed excitement regarding his future, detailing a teacher training program he had discovered at a university in Växjö. The program featured a major in the French language and offered the very tangible prospect of studying abroad in France for a while. This conversation was important because it indicates a state of optimism, cognitive clarity, and a focus on the long term. Such a mindset is inherently contradictory to the prospect of a voluntary disappearance. So, you have this picture of a healthy, happy, athletic young man with plans for the future, who just suddenly disappears out of nowhere. The evening began as a pretty standard social evening. On Friday, the 4th of December 2020, Mattias and his twin brother attended a small house party located in the Outgårdsvägen area of Ljungby. The gathering consisted of a tight-knit group of friends, and witness accounts confirmed that the social atmosphere was relaxed. The attendees were drinking and consumed a moderate amount, but observers unanimously agreed that Mattias was not heavily intoxicated. Investigations revealed absolutely no evidence or suggestion of illicit substance use at the gathering. Throughout the initial hours of the event, Mattias's demeanour was described as normal, relaxed, and cheerful. I have seen a few different timelines, though I believe the following to be the correct one. Mattias arrived at the party at 7:45 PM, where Dennis had briefly left to go on a walk with someone. At around 9 PM, the broader group began formulating plans to transition to a secondary gathering at a residence on Klutvägen, a location hosted by a girl whom Mattias had reportedly not met before. Just after 9 PM, the group, including Mattias, found themselves now at this second residence. Somewhere between 12:30 AM and 1 AM on the morning of Saturday, the 5th of December, something bizarre and completely out of the ordinary would occur. Mattias, who had been calmly sitting on a couch with his friends, abruptly stood up and announced his departure. While it was reported that he sounded completely normal and he did not appear outwardly distressed, panicked or upset, his subsequent actions were profoundly strange and basically instantly dangerous. Mattias exited the residence directly into the near-freezing winter night, leaving behind every crucial piece of survival gear and personal identification. He abandoned his shoes, his winter jacket, his mobile phone, his wallet, and his keys. Furthermore, his bike, which he had used to travel to the location, remained parked outside the property. It's very difficult to understand this behaviour, other than stating that for one reason or another, it seems to indicate a severe cognitive disconnect. The temperature at that time was hovering between 3 and 5 degrees Celsius, or 37 and 41 degrees Fahrenheit. There were remnants of snow from previous days on the ground, significantly reducing the surface temperature of the terrain too. Leaving your shoes behind in such conditions would obviously not be a good idea. When Dennis eventually returned home from the secondary party and discovered that his brother had not arrived, the family immediately recognised that something was not right. Upon learning that Mattias's personal items were left behind at the party, Dennis and Erica began an immediate but unsuccessful localised search before officially contacting the police that same night to report him missing. Both of them thought that they'd heard a shout or scream, though disagreed on the origin. It is not clear to me where they were standing at the time, but Dennis believed that the sound emanated from Hjortsberg, while Erica believed it was coming from the direction of Augårdsbron Bridge here. Apparently, it is later understood that Mattias may have been seen near the area around the bridge at some point. In any case, because of the serious nature of what was going on, Erica and Dennis had reported everything to the police. The pair wanted to cross the bridge in their search, but according to Dennis, the police stopped them from crossing, stating that they could destroy any tracks left behind and that they must wait for a search dog. Following his departure, Mattias engaged in a series of highly erratic movements through the residential outskirts of Ljungby. Between 1:20 am and 1:44 am, Mattias approached a home in the Small Sparrow area and knocked on the door. He asked the male resident for a cup of tea. The resident, wary due to recent burglaries in the area, and who was also a victim of burglary himself, assumed it was a prank or a setup and dismissed him. Around 1:30 am, he was visually observed running at full speed down Small Sparrow. During this sprint, he triggered the alarm of a parked car. The vehicle's owner and his daughter opened their door to investigate the disturbance. The daughter recognised Mattias and started a conversation. Mattias confirmed his identity and stated he was looking for a girl on Klutvägen. Now, Klutvägen was only 100 to 200 metres away from where they were standing. It seems to me that it would be safe to say that by this time, Mattias will likely have been suffering from hypothermia, which of course deeply impairs cognitive ability. However, that doesn't tell the whole story, because Mattias seems to have suffered cognitively for one reason or another right before leaving the party. Mattias then abruptly ended the conversation, stating, "See you later." He sprinted in the direction of Klutvägen. He was briefly captured on a private security camera traversing a garden. The father and daughter, alarmed by his lack of footwear, attempted to follow him in their car but lost sight of him entirely. This description of his running as energetic and at full speed suggests a massive, I'd imagine, adrenaline-fueled flight response. Of course, because Mattias was so fit and was a great runner, it seems that even under the circumstances, it was just difficult to keep up and track him. Especially since he had a head start before they were even in the car. It is just important to highlight that multiple witnesses explicitly noted that Mattias was steady on his feet, ran in a straight line, and did not seem to be intoxicated. So it does seem as though something else might have been happening here, though it's not exactly clear what it was. Between 2 am and 3 am, unconfirmed reports indicate that someone, believed to be Mattias, knocked on the door of another property near a rural farm and asked for a glass of water. The resident felt uneasy and shut the door. Additionally, there were unverified reports of yelling or cries for help in the area during this window. And that is where the trail essentially ends. The scale of the response to Mattias's disappearance was unprecedented for the region. Immediate mobilisation occurred on the morning of the 5th of December. The Swedish police deployed immense resources, including helicopters, unmanned aerial vehicles, and specialised dog tracking units. A dedicated Facebook group, Help Us Find Mattias, rapidly amassed over 12,500 members to coordinate massive grid searches. Civilian searchers used GPS trackers to document their routes, ensuring that vast swathes of the forest were methodically cleared. Ljungby is characterised by a mix of dense residential neighbourhoods, expansive tracts of dense forests, and rivers. The most prominent barrier in the region is the River Lagan, which flows directly through the area. This river became the primary focal point of the search. From December 2020 through the ensuing years, the waterway was subjected to intense scrutiny by sonar-equipped boats, advanced underwater drones, and specialised dive teams. The working hypothesis that Mattias entered the water was reinforced by the deployment of specialised cadaver dogs. On multiple distinct occasions, independent search dogs alerted handlers to the exact same location along the riverbank. In December of 2021, police confirmed that these repeated canine alerts strengthened the official operating theory that Mattias had fallen into the Lagan. Civilian divers, most notably a man named Henrik Sandqvist, dedicated extraordinary personal resources to the search, logging over 153 cumulative hours diving into the treacherous and low visibility waters. However, despite this exhaustive, multi-year diving intervention, absolutely no physical trace of Mattias was ever recovered from the river. It is just important to add here that while falling into the river does seem to have been the primary working hypothesis, it is not definitive, and it is possible that something else entirely could have happened. The reason that many have come to believe this seems to come from a piece of evidence that was discovered just before the 25th of December, or around 20 days after he disappeared. Volunteer searchers located a single dark sock in a densely wooded area. To my knowledge, the precise location of the find has never been officially revealed. When looking online, things are rather vague, and some sources state that the sock was found in a densely wooded area near Highway 25. However, if we're trying to understand the likelihood as to whether or not he'd fallen into the river, it's important to have a better understanding than that. So I did some more research and I came across some individuals discussing Mattias. They seemed to believe, based on Facebook conversations that they'd come across involving people who'd been searching, that the sock was actually found in this area here on this dirt road. In addition to that, this press outlet states that Erica said, just before Christmas 2020, a sock was found along a dirt road in the Replesa area in Ljungby. So, I'd have to imagine that the sock was found, at least in this general area. Although, the Smålänningen outlet states that the sock was found in an area above Midsommarvägen, making it out to be here somewhere. I'm not really sure why this information isn't more specific. From the first suspected dirt road, it is about 3/4 of a mile from the river, while this second area is about half a mile away from the river. I've had to come back to edit this part in, but the discovery of the sock actually led to some controversy. It is first worth pointing out that the sock was found in an area that the police had already searched before its discovery. Meaning, I suppose, either they just missed it during the search, or you'd have to start reasoning as to whether or not there is any possibility that it could have been placed there after the fact. Of course, that is practically impossible to answer at this stage. In any case, the authorities refused to subject the sock to DNA analysis. I was initially under the assumption that their reasoning for this was because it was found on the outer edges of the search area, and beyond the primary search area since they were so focused on the river. However, according to Mattias' family, it seems that they were told that the sock could only be sent off for analysis if there was a strong indication of foul play, which there was no direct evidence of. That doesn't seem like fantastic reasoning to me because surely, or hypothetically speaking anyway, the analysis itself could have the potential to reveal such evidence and would have provided an obvious answer to that question. Erica disagreed with the police assessment, and she began to believe that Mattias felt hunted for some reason. It is of course worth reiterating that Mattias left the party in a strange fashion, potentially indicating that something cognitively was not right. So it could have been the case that Mattias was genuinely being followed, or it could have been the case that he believed that he was being followed. There doesn't seem to be an obvious way one might discern that now. But either way, it seems that poor decision making is like a universal police language sometimes for some reason. We have our fair share of that in the UK too if you've been watching the channel recently. You have a very obvious potential piece of evidence, and it essentially just gets ignored on the basis of what seems to me to be faulty reasoning. Erica rightly refused such logic too, and was not going to allow the evidence to degrade further, and she managed to secure the services of a professor of forensic genetics at an academic institution to have the fabric analysed herself. This analysis took place 5 months later at the end of April in 2021. An assessment of the sock also provided some insights into Mattias' movements. Erica noted the presence of small distinct holes located exclusively under the front of the sock. In the context of the rough, unforgiving forest terrain where it was found, it suggests that Mattias must have been running on his forefeet as opposed to a normal stride. When an individual runs barefoot or without proper footwear over painful, rocky or uneven terrain, the body automatically shifts from a standard heel strike gait to a forefoot strike gait. I'd never thought about this before now, but it seems that we do this involuntarily and it acts as a way to absorb shock to protect the heel from injury. Erica and Dennis also discovered peculiar markings etched into the dirt approximately 50 meters from where the sock was located. The markings consisted of distinct faces drawn into the ground, with the eyes deliberately crossed out, accompanied by various arrows pointing in different, seemingly random directions. I have to admit, reading about this part gave me a bit of a chill. Erica believed that these drawings were related to Mattias, while the police seemed to believe that these drawings were already there and must have been made by youngsters in the area. I must admit that it is a very strange coincidence given how close they were to the sock. If they were created by Mattias, maybe you could reason that it was a highly disorganised attempt to leave a trail for the searchers, though it's odd, and I say that with no confidence whatsoever. Alternatively, as the police suggested, the drawings could be entirely unrelated to the disappearance. These forests are frequented by hikers, hunters and local youth. The markings could be completely disconnected and irrelevant to the case, but it seems to me that it's just not possible to know. Now, I absolutely hate that some sickos do this, but this part does need reporting on. In the months following the disappearance, Erica became the target of trolls and people trying to take advantage of the situation. An unidentified user on Snapchat contacted her claiming to know of Mattias' location, then went on to demand 25,000 Swedish krona for the information. That's about £2,000 or about $3,000. When the family hesitated, demanding proof of life, this sick individual then lowered the demand to 15,000 and goaded the family. This waste of space then ultimately provided a location indicating that Mattias was being held at a specific agricultural farm located on the opposite side of the River Lagan. Law enforcement treated this with seriousness and went on to search the property. However, the operation yielded absolutely no evidence of Mattias' presence whatsoever. From an investigative standpoint, this is highly indicative of a common digital fraud scheme, rather than a genuine scenario. Something very similar happened to Jack O'Sullivan's mother here in the UK. I will leave a link to my coverage on Jack in the description below. I've had to rewrite this part a few times, but there isn't a punishment great enough for these people that do this. I'd love to give you my genuine thoughts, but I'd probably be banned from the platform. To give you an idea though, what these freaks actually do is routinely monitor missing person databases and social media groups, and if they come across something like this, they'll try to exploit the families of the missing, basically. Quite literally, while the family is in the worst possible state dealing with what's happened. It's difficult to even imagine what's going on in their heads to do something as horrible as that, but people like this exist, and they're out there. Evil exists, and I'm so tired of pretending that it doesn't, or that people like this somehow need to be understood. Anyway, moving on from that, what actually happened to Mattias then? The various witness testimonies, the route he took, the manner in which he left in the first place, and the finding and state of the sock supports three distinct possibilities. The most agreed upon suggestion posits that while at the party, Mattias likely suffered a sudden, severe psychological incident, leading to deep confusion and exposure while out in the cold. The abrupt departure from the party without protective clothing or shoes in near freezing temperatures is difficult to ascertain if that was not the case. Witnesses described him as acting bizarrely, running at full speed as if he was running away from an invisible threat. I will just add to that behaviour reminds me a lot of what happened to Rory Johnson Hatfield here in the UK, who I will also leave a link to in the description below for my coverage. For Mattias, this behaviour does seem to align with an acute panic state or becoming highly delirious. If Mattias fled into the rough, wooded terrain either near Highway 25, or perhaps more likely much further to the east, that basically would have taken him far away from potential safety. In the low ambient temperatures of that night, most individuals without any protective gear would experience severe hypothermia relatively quickly. It really depends on the weather too. If it was raining or if there was significant cold wind, that process would speed up dramatically. But even if that isn't the case, it's a very bad situation to be in. At the end stages of hypothermia, some people have been known to engage in what is called terminal burrowing, which is exactly as described. If Mattias did try to find a small enclosed space within the dense forest, he would have been exceptionally difficult to find from the air via helicopters, or through standard ground searches at that. This could help to explain why the massive grid searches failed to locate him if he didn't enter the river as originally thought. With that being said, that is actually the second suggestion. The same circumstances apply, but instead of the end stages of hypothermia, an accidental fall into the River Lagan is suggested. After all, the low visibility at night, combined with cognitive impairment, could make a fall more likely. This suggestion also may have some support, since separate, highly trained search dogs did hint at the same location along the river. I'm not sure how you reconcile that if the sock was found on that dirt road. It seems unlikely that he would have travelled all the way back to the river at that point, but certainly not impossible. Also, the total absence of a body, despite major focused dive efforts, does introduce some doubt to that too. Though this river has variable currents, underwater snags, and also shifting sediment can transport or deeply conceal a body and make it inaccessible. The third idea considers various forms of foul play. On the 9th of December 2020, just 4 days into the search, the police did actually upgrade the case status and opened an investigation as to whether Mattias could have been taken by a third party at some stage. This could have been opportunistic if someone had passed by, for example. But there is another alternative to that idea, while still considering foul play. In the weeks preceding the 5th of December, the residential neighbourhood had experienced a series of burglaries. Consequently, local residents were on high alert and set up warning alerts to one another through neighbourhood watch channels, presumably through text or WhatsApp or something similar. On the night in question, Mattias was captured on security cameras cutting through private gardens, running wildly and knocking on doors at around 2 AM. The idea has been brought up that a hypervigilant or paranoid person may have misidentified the erratic fleeing teenager as a burglar. In a high adrenaline, middle of the night confrontation in the dark, it is possible that an individual might have attempted to intercept Mattias, which could have ended badly. To clarify, that is only a point of speculation that I've seen spoken about. There's no evidence that something along those lines occurred, but you could see how being faced with the realization of having accidentally done this, the person may have subsequently hidden all evidence. People have pointed to the fact that there are accounts of people hearing cries for help in the area on that night. Despite investigative attempts, the hypothesis failed to find any evidence, and the police eventually suspended this specific angle of the investigation. As of 2026, the search and the hope for a resolution has continued. Annual candlelight vigils are organised by friends and volunteers near the Lagan River, and serve as a hope that it will eventually be understood as to what took place that night. These public memorials, I'd hope, help to make sure that Mattias remains in the public consciousness, and helps to maintain some pressure so that it doesn't become a forgotten investigation. In the end though, while we have some possibilities, it's not really understood what happened to Mattias at this time. Until new evidence is discovered, it's just not possible to know what precisely happened with a high degree of confidence. With that being said, that brings us to the end of this. Please do remember to subscribe and turn on notifications for the channel, and also to like the video and hype it if you can. I'd be very grateful. Or a dislike if you disliked it. I'd just like to thank you for watching, and a really big thank you to the patrons who've been running around on the screen. Be safe all. Peace.